How many have put on presentations on this one? Once more. I think I saw 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That is a very good number. Then we can do exactly what we wanted. We can hold this group here. We don't need another room. We had prepared another room if everybody did it. And it's not necessary that everybody does it. It's a very good way of starting a discussion on the differences and the common themes. So then I can think I should start at this end. And you have the floor. And can you find it on there? You get this one?
Okay, thank you. I will be very, very quick. I'll introduce. Okay, thank you. But I have no images. Very, very simple presentation. Okay. And my name is Francesco Spanetta. I came from the Department of Architecture, Design and Urban Planning of the University of Sassari in Alghero. And, okay. And we have a PhD course in architecture and the environment. I'm not the relevant person to talk about it because I'm not the coordinator of the PhD, but I'm just here to talk about this. The interesting thing, I think, in our PhD is that it was part of the bigger project when the Italian university underwent kind of reform in recent times with a radical changes in the structure of departments. We began to think that there could be a possibility to merge actually the Department of Architecture and the departments of social sciences together in one, not social, sorry, environmental sciences together in one big department that could actively deal with the description of the environment and with its transformation. So we should have together architects, urban planners, ecologists, biologists, and so on. Sorry. Yeah, okay. I'll try. So the project went not that far, and the PhD started as a first step of this project. So the PhD is still here, and there's a interdisciplinary PhD that is open to students from different disciplinary fields, from architecture and related sciences and environmental sciences, and is centered on the analysis and the modification of the built environment. So it's actually a multidisciplinary approach. And maybe the definition of the day before yesterday of undisciplinated instead of multidisciplinary is particularly fit to our field, because there is a various combination of different disciplines that are not always the same. So this is a short history. Since 2 years, the program is a joint program with the University of Karabuk. It's wrong, the name here. Maybe the automatic corrector made some mess, but it's the University of Karabuk in Turkey. And this interdisciplinary idea that is behind the PhD program is also the idea that underpins our programs in architecture and urbanism. So there is a kind of continuity between the bachelor, master, and the PhD in terms of cultural vision of architecture as a part of an environment. The program, 3 years program, is usually in Italy. We have 6 new students each year, and in total 18 students each year. Candidates have to undergo an examination where an important role is played by their curricula, and relevant publications and an interview. It's, in our opinion, I mean the opinion of the PhD board, a bit odd to ask for publication to a candidate for a PhD, because maybe we could have good candidates that still didn't publish, but this is a policy at a university level. Our university has this policy for all the PhD, so we have to keep it in the admission process. The monitoring and reporting process is based on 2 collective reviews in front of the whole PhD board per year, and each candidate has a tutor, and they have periodical reviews as many times as needed in the process. The exam committee is made of external professor. The formal requirements to end the PhD is a written thesis, and this is also something that we are a bit thinking about, because well, written thesis, we try to transform it when it is possible in a kind of design work, but it's a relevant written part has to be there in order to be a valid PhD thesis in Italy. And every candidate had to spend 1 year abroad. Among the examples of theses that we had, there are usual topics like refurbishment and architectural theory and so on, but we also had some interesting work on landscaping through wetlands, so using all these different disciplines inside the PhD program to combine a project where there is thinking about the cycle of the water, the reuse of the water, and agriculture, and coastal management. Another interesting PhD thesis that is on work right now on water management in Samoa Islands, resilient city design and risk management with case studies in Thailand and Japan. We had Thailandese and candidates that worked on this. The work on Samoa Island is made by an Italian candidate, and then work on renewable energies and urban structure. And these are teams that put all the professor of the PhD board working together and trying to mix their competencies with the thesis. Okay, thank you.
And there are also some questions, if you have some questions for you. I think you should stay here to answer questions if there are any. Yes?
I was mainly interested also in the funding. Is it funded by the institution itself, or is there a kind of other funding?
I had exactly the same question.
So funding is always a tricky thing. There are some grants that are provided by institution itself. There are some grants that are provided by the regional government. And we have also some grants coming from public or private agencies that usually somehow there are people working in a public or private agency that, because of the agency needs or because of their own needs, they want to study 3 years a particular topic. And then they take their income to study 3 years. So they are considered as grants. This is a thing that happened just last year, but helps to build a different panel of candidates.
Yeah, I have a question for you, and I also have my own microphone now.
Still? Okay.
And this is, you said it was transdisciplinary.
Yes.
How do you deal with the jumps between the disciplines? How do you find the criteria to jump between, if it's a single?
This is a right question, I think, because it's, well, our experience is that at the very end, it's the people that talks together, not the discipline. So the trick is to find the right people that actually want to discuss things. So there are 2 things. The first one, I must say very frankly, it's not always the best professor in his field or her field, the best people to talk with, because often people that are very intensively working on a topic not always want to cross their boundaries and discuss things in a different way. So it's very difficult to find the people, but somehow we managed to find some of them. The other thing is that we shouldn't never, if possible, to work efficiently, we should never start from the discipline, but from the topic. So, for example, landscaping through wetlands. So, when we talk all together around a map, around real problems, it's far easier to cross the boundaries between disciplines than starting to talk about what my discipline do, what their discipline do, and so on. Because it's like the words automatically rise fences, whereas practical things are an easier way to overcome and to go around these fences.
Thank you. I would also maybe try to rephrase. No, you can have that. I would just, my conclusion is also that you say you create a community of the people who work with this specific project, and you create a dialogue between these people who follow the rules of dialogue, which means that when you cannot say anything more, you give the word to somebody who can say, talk differently about the same thing, and you know how to exchange this ability to speak. So a room of dialogue is also a room of jumping between different sets of criteria of thinking. So this is very interesting. Yes, what you said is very interesting.
Yes, well, if I can add something, I think that this is an important role of space. I see also an architectural project that it could help to overcome boundaries. When we speak about spaces, like we abandon the words that are somewhere a bit of they drag their boundaries behind them, and when we talk directly about space and the combinations of spatial configuration, it helps very much to left behind all this realm of word.
Thank you. We are sitting in a room doing exactly that right now. I'm sorry, I took the word from you, because I think we need now to go on. And the next one was, it was you? Yeah, I think it was you. So now if you can only start you, and thank you. I'm talking in half sentences, but you know what I mean. We'll be very strict with the time. It's not out of being impolite, it's being polite to the room. So I will be the Mussolini of this, this regulation of time. I'll
try to go very quick then. I did first a very factual presentation, presenting all our setting about the PhD, and then I had some examples to discuss, also trying to raise the problems that we are facing, or I am facing actually. So we have actually 5 research centers that you can see. They are all having Alice, Hortense, Sacha, Louise, Habité, and they are thematic. So the idea is that these research centers are connected in terms of team studio education, something that Victor explained a bit yesterday about, but they're also their own autonomy. And people like me, academics, are parts in the research center. I'm in Louise, Laboratory Urbanism, Infrastructure and Ecology, and also part in the teaching program. I just took the main definition that we have. First, maybe in terms of typology, we have 3 kinds of possible PhD, although most of them are just the first one, an original dissertation. That's the most classical or conventional way, and most of the students are actually doing this. We have the idea of the PhD by scientific paper, although at the moment it's not really common to do in this way. Although every student wishes to do that, it's always end up being very difficult. And we have also, I would say, the last one that is, I don't know if I can point here, yeah, the one which is based on the professional practice that has been discussed, I think, a lot in EAAE. I have to say that in our case, we have not achieved yet to have only one of the professional at doing this kind of PhD. We don't have, I would say, one of the questions that you asked was how many students succeed to enter the program. You enter, in our case, once you have a clear agreement with a supervisor, so it's a kind of, I would say, a buffer against having too many loose, I would say, applications. So usually when the candidates get the approval and get into writing the proposal, then he's already having, let's say, a good connection with a supervisor, but it has to go to the, apart from the supervisor, this faculty doctoral commission that is actually accepting or not accepting the PhD. We have then, I guess it's the same, it's something to share, a supervisory committee, a supervision committee that meets once a year. It's apart from the supervisor and eventually a co-supervisor, it had at least 2 other academics, presidents, and it meets once a year to see the advance of the candidate and to see if he can continue. The PhD, and this I'm not sure it's part of Bologna or is it different in your case. We have a 60 ECTS, what we call research training, where they actually have to choose with the supervisor what's taking part in course, seminar, conference, writing a paper, and after 2 years they should have completed this 60 ECTS training program. There is a midterm, let's say, evaluation after 2 years, and usually I put 4 years. It depends, of course, you can, but that's, I would say, that's the minimum. And in the final jury, we always add 2 external jury members that are outside of the, let's say, the 4-year process of them. In terms of total data, we are a faculty of 1,200 bachelor master students, let's say, altogether, and we have now around 55 PhD students. We have a pressure, that's something I would like to hear from you, but we have a pressure, of course, from our university to enroll and to have more PhD defending their PhD because it's a ranking model, and so we lose if another university of the same country get more PhD, then we will lose money and they will get more money. So of course there is a kind of a conflict between quality and quantity that is important. Out of these 55, around 30 are funded. It means they have a real salary during the 4 year of their research. 12 around are FNRS, is the national or the regional in Belgium, let's say, agency, let's say, supporting individual PhD initiative. 12 are ARES. Those are ARES is for the developing countries. It means students that usually stay 4 months a year in our institution and the rest in their home country. They have a supervisor in our institution and they do a research about their own country, let's say. And then the other 8, I would say, around are for EU larger scale funding. If you see, we are around 11 academics, so it means each of us out of these academics have around 5 PhD students, which I think it's a heavy load already to follow. Victor presented one of these, I would say, collective or this PhD school that we have that are different in the way that they are collective projects involving usually 4 or 5. I would show an example later. And then we have reached to have 2 EU-funded projects that are larger scale. And I would say that those are very comfortable because when we have these, we don't have to each year apply for a new. They last 5 years at least, so you know that for 5 years we have enough money. And of course, I see my role and the role of these academics more and more as looking for money, as businessmen, more than academic, because it's not so much, it's about the quality, but it's also to have the funding to pay all the students and this research. Those are the topics of the 4 PhD schools in Africa. Yesterday, Victor presented This one, it's the same, I would say, model. 5 or 6 PhD students from 4 to 5. The funding for one of these projects is 500,000 euro around. So it means for 4 years paying mainly the 4 or 5 PhD students. Usually you cluster another funding, if possible, around this 500,000. And then it pays their stay in Belgium for the 4 months a year, the travel with, for the supervisor, some seminar and so on. Those are very, very interesting. I will show some example. It's 2 live, but that's one in Ethiopia. You don't see very much the picture, but it's a research center on emerging town in Ethiopia. It's a country where the countryside has an extremely high rate of urbanization, I would say. Where small town like this is a remote town. It takes 1 day to go by bus there. You could take first the airplane from Addis Ababa. The previous day you have to stay, then you have 1 day by this extremely mountain road, and then you arrive there. And this is one of the case study, which is around 3,000 or 4,000 inhabitants. In the middle of, you see a nature, a wonderful nature, but it's a completely inhabited territory. It means you have, it's a productive territory, although it seems completely green. And in this case, for example, the 5 PhD are working, each of them, in relation to this case study, but the main question of emerging town in Ethiopia and on one specific thematic topic. So around this, the university in Addis, the idea is to have a capacity for them to later, once this project is finished, to have their own PhD school and to continue being able to. So the main goal is to have a pool of academic staff in Addis with a PhD that later on will be able by their own to do. And I would say for me this is the main change in relation to the developing world. I think is that now, before we used to have our student going to study about Ethiopia. In this case, for example, it's only Ethiopian PhD students doing their work, and we kind of put a conceptual and methodological framework for having them their research. This is the same town that you can see here. This is the PhD school in Kinshasa, although this is just outside of Kinshasa, so it looks mainly at urbanization against along Kinshasa. This is the whole staff, including local professor. When we, of course, I would say, have PhD student. I have one student in this project. We have local professors that are really great, just they don't have the ability to give a PhD by themselves because the school doesn't have the means, and also it is not allowed by the state. But there is a huge pool of interesting stakeholders that take part, including also, for example, municipality, government, and so on, that can take part in these projects that, of course, are usually very applied and not just theoretical. Just to show you, because the former image might give you the idea that this is very great, but of course there is a lot of challenge there, I would say. And this is maybe just to mention the last project, which is a project funded by ERDF, so European Regional Funding, which is also a very great opportunity because it's a cluster of 12 researcher, doc and postdoc, and again there it includes not only the PhD, let's say, funding, but also a place that is a research center that we have for 5 years outside of the university and shared by different research centers, and where there are other possible events to be organized. Okay, I stop here because we're on time.
I need to be this strong. No, not strong, but strict. It's very different. Is there any questions for clarification? Yes? You will get this one, and you will have this.
All right. I have mainly the question, it was also for the previous one, because we are now discussing much about themes, thematic and topics and content-wise. But what kind of research methods are used? Because I see quite a variety in types of PhDs. Some are policy-related, very practical, applicable, others are more fundamental. So I can assume that you have some kind of portfolio of methodology. So I would like to know what kind of types and what kind of of the what types of methodology you really see as architectural related, and others who are related to other disciplines, just to have an idea.
Well, I would say that each of us as academic would not cover everything that has been shown. So we have each of us our own speciality, I would say. So I have a colleague that is much more specialized into governance, for example, and planning, decentralization of urban services, for example, and she usually followed the students into this field. I have another one like, sorry? It will depend very much on each case, but I would say that the main, let's say, the broader methodology is for sure social science. It is the most, so we are a school of architecture and not of engineering, so we position ourselves, I would say, not into purely quantitative studies, you know, being, so usually each of these PhD is related to one case study, as I've shown, so it involves a lot of research of empirical data on sites, usually using, I would say, interviews, sometimes GIS mapping tools, research by design. It can be, it depends very much. Some of our professors would be more, let's say, turned into research by design, for example. Other, like this colleague I was talking about, more into using some, in that case it's more mainly from geographer, but this question of decentralized urban services, for example, it's indeed very far maybe from the traditional way of doing design and architecture in the schools. Most of the, not the developing country, but I would say the PhD being done by North or Belgium student in Belgium or European student in Belgium are very, very influenced by social science, because our former dean was a sociologist and philosopher, so he really grounded into different body of works, I would say, that are. But it means also that each student in every case has to define with the supervisor and the committee his own methodological, so we don't arrive, you know, with a toolkit or a framework that is already defined, and a big part of the PhD is about defining this methodology and the conceptual, let's say, and theoretical, let's say, keywords and so on.
Thank you. I think we have to move on. I will only note that there are some other possible lines of questioning, and that concerns the question of, is it this is a school or is it a faculty with only 9 staff, this kind of thing. And how do you deal with being a school when you only have 5 students and 1 place in Africa and you move around? So that these are questions that could be addressed in another session. Just noting them as questions, but I don't think we should go into the discussion of them. There was a lady from Bordeaux. Yes. She did not have a stick because I did not ask for a stick specifically, so that is my fault. But she will be able to talk to us now because we need everybody who has prepared to present. Thank you. Yeah, she needs that one.
You can hear me? Yeah. Okay. So, sorry, I don't have any presentation, and my English is not so good, but I try to do it in English. I prepare something for you. I think it's important to present how it matches in France, because it's very different in School of Architecture. As you know, perhaps, schools of architecture in France are independent from the university. So we currently only university and specific schools like Polytechnique or ENS, École Nationale Supérieure, are allowed to award PhD degree. So we have to be attached with a doctoral school to be able to welcome PhD students. So like in the present presentation, in France, in Bordeaux, we have 3 research centers, and each centers is attached with 1 school, doctoral school. 1 with sociology, 1 with geography, and 1 this I want to present to you with engineering. I can only speak about our school, doctoral school, because each doctoral school has its proper fonctionnement. I don't know in English. You understand? Each have its rules. Okay? So I can only speak about ours, doctoral schools. So the Greco laboratory welcomes PhD students since a long time. In fact, as soon as one of the researchers obtained a HDR, in English, accreditation of supervising research. So we can't supervise a PhD student if we don't have this diploma, can say diploma. So in Greco, we start when one of the researchers obtains this accreditation. So the first PhD defense was in 2002. Now, I want to say that our PhD are not registered at school, but at the university and so on, in engineering science, doctoral school, in which our teachers are attached. But on their diploma, it's mentioned specialty, architectural science and techniques. But in fact, they have a PhD in science, in physics science. Today, it represents about 10 PhD students obtained and 4 in preparation. We have about 1 or 2 candidates per year. Not so bad, because we are a little laboratory. Most of them are architects. Sometimes they prepare their PhD directly after they obtain their diploma of architecture, and sometimes they prepare a master degree in SPE, Science for Engineering. Some students have a university master degree in science only, but they want to prepare a PhD around architecture. So they come, they contact us and they come to work with us. They come from French university, but not only. They come from other countries in the world. For their acceptance, first they have to find a supervisor who want to work with them, or a team. As I explained, we have not a lot of teachers have their HDR, so one professor is the official supervisor, but they have co-supervisor, and we also use people like co-encadrant. We are PhD. We have a PhD, but we have no HDR, and we can't be supervisor, but we can follow the students. So, in the most of the case, we have a team around the students. To be registered, they have to find a supervisor or team, a funding. In SPE doctoral school, they must have a funding. If they don't, they can't be registered in PhD. And it's a really a big problem, because it's very difficult to obtain funding from public institutions. Sometimes they can have funding from private agency, but it's very rare. And then they have to obtain the agreement of the director of the doctoral school. We have no committee. It's only the supervisor and the director of the doctoral school who decide if the student is able to purchase a PhD. The topics on which they work in our laboratory is our topics, of course. And I can explain that we are working about physical ambiances and comfort, urban ethnology, architectural and urban morphology, materials and eco-building, landscape, and use and identity regrouped in 3 axes: ambiances and comfort, eco-construction, and energy-saving architecture. And we both work in 3 direction with 3 approach: architectural approach, engineering approach, and human science approach. So in their PhD, they not obligatory, but very often use 2 or 3 of this approach. When they are enrolled in PhD, the students have some obligation, of course. They have to follow 100 hours of training. It's obligatory. University offers training on scientific integrity and ethics, research methods, philosophy of science, and so on. Article writing method, it's a writing method, it's very important. They have to participate to doctoral seminar with other students of the university, so on very large topics, and to present their research very often. They present their work to their supervisor and to the team, but also to all the researchers of the laboratory. We organize very often meeting to work, to speak, to exchange about the work. And they must prepare a progress report on their research each year to be registered for the next year. Considering the assessment committee, it will be composed from 4 to 8 people, in which we can find co-supervisor, co-supervisor, and co-encadrant, and 2 rapporteurs. I don't know in English, but it's people who only read and come to the defense, the work of the student. Concerning formal requirements, usually students write a thesis presenting a theoretical approach to the subject and the methodological positioning and the result of their experiments. And to answer to the question you asked on your mail, I want to say that I think that PhD education in School of Architecture in France, which is a very special situation, is essential to advance both practical and theoretical knowledge, which is then transmitted to the student in bachelor and master degree. Sorry.
Thank you. And you need to stay here for maybe some questions. I think also we need maybe to, if we are going to say anything in the end, we will need to make maybe it shorter. It's my fault because I have not asked you to do it, but I will ask the others now to, maybe we should rush on a little bit to be able to say something in the end. But I have one question for you, but only then. For me, if you have one, you have to one. You said you had to connect to a PhD school. Because do you have a third cycle within the architectural school as well? It's only PhD that is outside the architectural school. Okay.
It's only university.
Yeah. So, but you have a third cycle within the in your architectural school as well. Yes. Thank you. That is clarifying for me at least. Then, who did I see here? Yeah, I can take. Yeah. Another. I have been very bad with this information about the sticks, but still happy to see you.
Hello to everybody. Let me introduce me a little bit. My name is Spartaco Paris, and I am on behalf of my dean, Professoressa Anna Maria Giovenale from the University of Roma La Sapienza, Faculty of Architecture. I have prepared a short presentation, but it's not a problem, to make it shorter with very synthetic tips about our programs for the third cycle of education in our institution. Just a short forward to link with what Francesco from Alghero said, in order to explain how in general works the PhD programs in Italy, which are more or less organized as a central institutions by the ministry. First, they belong to what we call schools of doctorate, and it means that to be able to offer a PhD program, each schools or each department have to be selected with a process of accreditation, which comes from the ministry. The accreditation is related to the topic, to the program, and to the board which compose the structure of the school. Of course, also with the activity and the seminars and the specific duration of the study. So this point is quite rigid. I mean, we have an offer of doctorates which requires a duration of 3 years. And in general, if you are going to develop your research as a PhD student after these 3 years, it's going to be a problem. I mean, it's possible, but for instance, you are not financed. This point is the first point that it's common in the school of doctorates in Italy. So being a school of doctorates in Italy requires a process of enrollment or to attend, to select the candidates, which more or less is similar in the Italian university system. There is an exam with titles, like Francesco said, and with a draft of program in order to select the candidates, which are allowed to attend the school. And also it's important to point the fact that the most of the candidates which are selected will be granted. So there is a system of financing these schools for 3 years. Just for having samples about what happened in our faculty, we have a faculty which coordinates 4 departments, and each department offers its own doctoral program. For instance, the Department of Architectural Design can offer 2 different programs of doctorate. One is in architecture and construction, and we offer, for instance, this year, 8 positions and 6 fellowships. So it means that 2 students will attend the school with no grants, but the other with a grant for 3 years. There are also, for the norms of our university in general, extra position provided for foreign students. It's around 1/3 of each program. So it means, for instance, 8 positions for the doctorate in architecture and construction, plus 2 for foreign students. Each program has got different curricula, and I'm going on the weakness of our system. For instance, the doctorate in architecture and construction offer 1 curricula specifically in architectural and urban composition, another in urban morphology, another in economic assessment. Another program offered in the Department of Architectural Design is in theories and project, with 11 positions and 8 fellowship per year, and with 2 curricula, architecture theories and project, interior architecture and exhibit. Another one is a PhD program in landscape and environment, and so on. I'm not going to explain all the offer, but what I can point is that more or less at the Faculty of Architecture at La Sapienza, we offer around 50 positions per year for the doctorates, which means that more or less we graduate, more or less, quite 50 new PhD doctor per year. This is a good point, but this is also a weakness, because how are they going to do this huge number? In this case, our school is a big school, the second school after Politecnico di Milano, I think, in terms of School of Architecture. So what happened to the new 50 PhD doctor per year? I can say as a member of one board of the PhD in technology, happened that we are really a good fabric for exportation of brains at the moment. And actually we can say that our PhD doctor will not easily continue their activity of teaching, of research in Italy, but is happening that they are really occupy position worldwide. So this is a point that we can assume as a strength, but also as a weakness of the system. The other point, just a few minutes, is that in this, our organization, which is quite strict and quite rigid, each department belonging to the Faculty of Architecture offer his program. We have a problem in which this idea to jump between disciplines and between topics is quite complex to obtain, honestly. We have one department in which I attend the board, and which is the Department of Planning, Design, and Architectural Technology, that was born just as a sort of obliged marriage of interest, not for love. It was in around 2012, which offer a program of this kind of doctorate. And in this case, we say that although the different curricula, different teachers and people belonging to different sector of the discipline of architecture could try to merge. But actually, there is honestly a concrete problem of crossing the disciplinary curricula or profile of the doctorates.
Thank you.
Okay.
Then we have the opening of a possible question. Yeah.
Thank you. My name is Lubica Vitkova from Bratislava, Slovakia. I don't know if I understand well. Your ministry accredited also topics?
No. The ministry accreditate the program of the doctorate, which it's close to the topics.
Because it is differences. Because my second question was if these topics related to the state research priority, for example.
Now, when probably we misunderstand. When I said that the ministry accreditates the School of Doctorates, accreditates the general program of each doctorate, which means what kind of activity are related to research, what kind of activity are related to seminary, what kind of activity, and go on. No? For instance, there is a extra funding provided for spending a period up to 1 year to study on your own topic under the supervisor abroad. This is another extra funding. So it's not related to the specific field of each research. I think that for the complexity of our school, it requires a specific lecture if we want to focus on the topics. I think that it was useful to just have an overview about the institutional organization in a huge public Italian university.
It was very interesting, and I was very happy.
Yes, I agree.
Academic autonomy.
Okay.
I think there's one more question. Yeah.
Well, when we talk about the quality of research, whether in whatever discipline, it is very much related to all kinds of things, but mainly methodology, the clearness, the pureness of methodology, and the coaching by people who have enough knowledge and experience in methodology. So they combine their discipline with methodology. How do you guarantee the quality of the PhDs concerning this methodology and coaching when you have a very multidisciplinary focus and only 3 years to finalize a PhD? For me, it's practically impossible for a PhD student, first of all, to become acquainted with another discipline like architecture, then the methodology, then getting a coaching. So how do you cope with it? It's a bit of the same question for the others.
Yeah. I think it's an interesting question, but I think this is a bit for a topic for the position statement, because I don't think we should challenge you to answer that one. But I think it's a very interesting question to raise and to have a discussion on. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Later I'm going.
Yeah. Seb?
We are in Prague again.
Microphone.
I haven't been on the meeting in Prague, but this is a kind of survey based on your scheme, what you sent us. So it's maybe a little bit descriptive, but I will try to do it as quickly as possible. Some of you have been there in these schools, so there's a new faculty. We are very proud on it. So last 5 years we changed for this school, and it had a big influence on our quality and on our internal procedures. So this is, I hope you can see it a little bit. Yeah, this is our organigram. We have in fact three different columns, study directions. A+U is art, architecture, and urbanism, divided into 3 steps: bachelor, master, and doctoral study. We have also parallel program of industrial design, which is now complete, started in 2007, and now we have complete bachelor, master, doctoral study. And we started with a 3rd program, which is landscape architecture, which is not yet complete, not yet completely accredited, We just started with the bachelor study, and we have to finish our master study program, and there is no doctoral program on that. What is special for this discussion is, let's say, the doctoral study, which we have in 4 columns, 4 different fields. The main one is architectural theory and design. The second one is urban design, urbanism. Then it's monumental care. And the last one is building technology. And these 4 columns are somehow has a kind of umbrella organizational, but as a content and as teachers, it's divided into 4 different parts. Industrial design is a separate question. I will not talk much about that. You probably cannot see this. This is a kind of repetition of these programs. So the architectural plus urbanism has all the 3 grades. The industrial design also, and landscape architecture. The doctoral study at our school has a quite long tradition, because before, in the old system, before 89, there was a kind of system of candidates of science, which was first scientific degree, and it has a kind of similar content. But of course, I'm sorry. Let me go. I need some help.
I will do. I will go.
Okay, full screen, please. This one.
Yeah. Okay. Is it better? So if I take the points here, let's say the question of doctoral study has to do with this kind of tradition. On the other hand, there are, of course, let's say the present aims is for a lot of candidates is they will keep contact with the academy during the practical years. From our side, we of course try to educate a new personnel for research institutes and for the teaching, and so on, so on. Let's say the organization is quite simple, hierarchically. It means the leading of the faculty, it's Dean, a Vice Dean for Science and Research, and we have a kind of scientific and artistic council of the faculty, which is responsible for all programs within the faculty. But especially for a doctoral study, then is for these separate fields is a separate council for architecture and urbanism, which represents let's say 60% internal people, 40% external, and it's the main council responsible for the quality of doctoral study. And in these separate fields, there, which as I said, function quite separately, they have separate assessment committee, which is responsible for the procedure within that field. And similar as this one is the new formed council for industrial design. About quantity, we take about 25–30% in a year. We opened, of course, a kind of English possibility in English language, but it's starting, so it's very weak. But totally, for the whole faculty, we have about 180 students, which represents quite a lot of students. The number of tutors is circa 30 to 40, and the maximum students per tutor, it's limited. The committee, the scientific committee has a kind of limit. It means 5 students per tutor. We have two different possibilities. One is the daily study, which is financially supported, and there is also possibility to study on distance with no financing, and it depends very much on the possibilities of the student himself. Basic duration, the time you should finish is in 4 years. It means the financing is coupled on the official time of 4 years, but we have also a kind of time limit. It means 7 + 1, it means totally 8. But if you can count, of course, then the last 4 years you have to finance it yourself. It makes it's a kind of breaking point for a lot of candidates, of course. Our total effectivity is about 50% of people coming in the beginning and getting out on the end. So 50% is reasonable according to the system. The quality is the students are accepted on a study theme. So it means the departments from the school prepare study themes, and they should be agreed through these committees, and the students is free somehow to specify it better, but he should keep the main line of these theme for which he is accepted. Then this very important issue of individual study plan. All students have their own individual study plan. It means there are some requirements for general, let's say the first 2 years, they have to follow some subjects and get exams from it. But basically, this individual plan can also somehow respond to the different possibilities of the students and the different possibilities of the tutor. We introduced in last year much more kind of doctoral class, because the problem was every time that there were about 180 students in the school and the certain number of tutors which were quite individually busy. So we try somehow to get more visible system in it. One of the means is which is important for us. I'm sorry. Which is important is a kind of workshop in the first year. So the students, all students who are in the first year, they should come and present their progress. Last years we do it internationally. That means in the borders of the former Czechoslovakia. So we invite the students from Bratislava and from Brno to take part in these workshops, and it's very inspiring for the students and also inspiring for the tutors. Then is important point is the study defense, which is a commissional agreement on a detailed theme definition. It's about the end of the second year, beginning of the third year, and then to finish the complete study, you need a state examination, because in all study grades in our country you have to pass the state examination, which is a kind of formal approval that you can finish. And then is the final dissertation defense, which is a complicated procedure of tutors evaluation, statement of one or more opponents, and finally a commissional approval of the work. So it's serious, and then you get your diploma. What are the problems? The problems first in the content of the themes. The practice was that the themes were quite open, and people could choose whatever. So we had also a theme like cemeteries on Greek islands and these kind of very interesting things. In last years, we try more and more from the school to concentrate on important issues which are important for the school also. But it's so we try very intensive to connect study to running researches. But as we know, the architecture is not an issue for the state grant system, so it's not easy. Tutors, not all tutors have a PhD in our case, so it's a kind of generational gap which we have to fill in. And for the students, let's say if they come directly from the school, not after the master's study, then it's difficult because they have no practical experience. If they come later, they forgot all these academic issues. So there is a kind of problem in the beginning of the study. For the councils, it's not easy to find in this number of different councils to find qualified experts. Organization, I will say something about financing. The financing is not really sufficient, and especially for the students, so it's a big problem, even which is now discussed even on the governmental level. The students get a kind of students financing about 200 euro in a month, which is not sufficient. Well, it's a kind of support, but it's not sufficient. So everybody has to work, and that's of course a problem. That is the reason for these 50% of. I will not go too far.
I think we need to move on. It's very interesting, but we have to follow the
I finished
program.
just this one. There are in these 4 fields we have examples of actual themes, and as you see in architectural design and theory is much more open. So we talk about libraries in informational age and this kind of stuff. Urbanism, actual themes of urbanism, and I would say in urban issues we are very close to research programs of the city and a research program of the state institutions. Monumental care has a very good, in our case, has a very good connection to practical issues, and in the building technology, in the building technology, we collaborate very much with the civil engineering faculties of the university. So I will stop here.
Thank you.
Yeah?
And it's only because we have this limited amount of time. It's nothing wrong with your presentation, not at all. Thank you very much. I think then we had the problem stated, so I think we will not go into questions right now. If I can only see, I think there are 3 more. Could you show yourself? Yeah? Okay, we have 2 more. Yeah, thank you. But we need also some time at the end, so please. That works. Then it works.
Okay, I will be talking about Department of Architecture at Middle East Technical University in Turkey, Ankara. Oh, I forgot to take that. In our department, we have 4 different PhD programs. 4 programs concentrating on 4 different topics, as you see here: architecture, building science, conservation, and architectural history. I just put here some notes to introduce the department. The department is part of a faculty of architecture together with Department of City Planning and Department of Industrial Design. So indeed these PhD programs, they share their research environment with other departments in the faculty, such as research centers and laboratories they share. For the Department of Architecture itself, I wanted to emphasize we have undergraduate, of course, and graduate degrees of masters and 2-year masters and 4-year doctorate programs. And so for these 4 different programs, they are associated with Institute of Natural Sciences and Institute of Social Sciences. So they try to cover a wide area of expertise on theoretical, historical, and technical issues of the built environment, as you see here. For the history of the programs, indeed, master's programs, they started quite early in the 1960s, but the PhDs, they started from the 1980s onwards in different times. Different programs started in different times, but they already have quite a long history. For the numbers, the faculty, as you see here, we have about 40 faculty members teaching in all these on all these 4 different topics, and the students, I wanted to put the numbers for the undergraduates and the masters to kind of compare. We have currently 121 doctorate students. I put here some notes about the topics that the programs, different programs concentrate on. I will not go into much details of that, but as you see here, of course, in different fields of expertise, in their different fields of expertise, they try to cover a comprehensive area in research. As you see here, this is really very specified lines of research in each different program, but I will just also talk about the general system, how it works, which is common for all 4 PhD programs here. For admission, the PhD programs at our department accept students each semester, and for the application, we of course ask for transcripts, a portfolio, a letter of intent, to giving us the details of the research proposal of the student, and reference letters, of course. We also ask for an English test score, because the instruction is in English in our university, and also a general exam organized by Turkish Higher Education Council, or GRE. For foreign students, we ask for these documents. And then the education itself, it lasts a minimum of 8 semesters. This means 4 years. Requirements for the degree include coursework of required and elective courses, which are generally 7 or 8 courses, different in different programs, but minimum of 7 courses. And having completed the courses, the student has to pass a proficiency exam, which is a general exam on the topic of his or her expertise area. And then she or he starts to study on the dissertation. Students select their supervisors at the beginning of the 3rd semester, which means generally after completing their coursework. And after completing the coursework and passing the proficiency exam, what we call in Turkish a Thesis monitoring committee, which is like a supervising committee, is composed for each student, which is composed of the supervisor of the student and 2 other jury members, one from the METI faculty and one outsider. So this committee meets every 6 months with the student to discuss the progress of the dissertation research. So generally the dissertation research is the topic, the theme of the dissertation is decided by the student and the supervisor, but then the committee follows the process each semester, so it is kind of a controlled process. And at the end, the student defends the dissertation in front of a larger jury composed of, this time, 5 members. And I should add, I forgot to put it on the slides. Our university is a state university, so students, Turkish students, they don't pay fees. But there is a fee for foreign students, which is not very high, indeed quite low in comparison to the fees of the private universities, of course. So this I should have added.
Thank you very much. Then we have some time for 1 or 2 questions. We really have. I have one. Then I have one. I have one comment, really, because what appears to me now is a pattern. And this is the subject matters of these programs. There's one type of schools who are taking exactly the types of programs you have. Technology, you have conservation, you have history, and you have this big pool of design and theory that is usually the mixed soup of things and the problematic field. So it's interesting to also find the patterns here. But that was only a comment, it was not a question.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Then we go to the last one.
Hello, I am Vlad Thierry from the University of Architecture and Urbanism, Ion Mincu in Bucharest. And this is the presentation of our PhD program. So let's get going. About history, this is our dear old school up there, and the old building of our university. And the university was founded in 1892. Well, it was a attempt earlier with the modernization of Romania to make a civil engineer school, also with architecture, but it didn't work because mainly architects in Romania was trained abroad. And the history of our school, it's almost the same, and of our profession, it's almost the same of modernization of Romania. First, foreign architects came to our country and built, and then Romanian architects trained abroad started to build in Bucharest. So the year it's 1892, and then it came through a lot of transformations, and in 2000 to the architecture faculty we added 2 more around 2000. In 1997 the faculty of urbanism, and in 2003 the faculty of interior design. The doctoral school was established in the late 60s. First the architects with doctoral degree were also from abroad, which by that time mean USSR. But in the late 60s, we established our own doctoral school. Okay. Now, I am not part of the doctoral school, so maybe I don't know everything about it. Well, I was subject of object, I don't know which is the right word, of the doctoral school when I did my PhD. Basically, the organization is like this. You have to get 180 credits, from which 60 are from organized study form, I mean classes and so on, and 120, sorry, from individual research. So we had two doctoral schools. One is in architecture, and it's well, it was at some point a common project with the University of Bucharest, and we still continue this. And the other doctoral school is it's in urbanism. Sorry. After you finish and you graduate, you are granted with this title of Doctor in Architecture and Urbanism. So for 2017, we have these places at the doctoral school for 40 candidates, tutored by 12 supervisors, and in at the doctoral school in urbanism, 20 candidates tutored by 6 supervisors. And we will see in a couple of weeks how many of those places will be taken. Some of them are free of charges, and other of them are with taxes. To become part of, to enroll in the doctoral school, you have to defend the project of your future doctoral study in front of the commission, but previous to this one, you have to agree with your future supervisor about what you are going to do. So each supervisor is having has a number of subjects listed on the website, and each candidate should think about the subject he or she wants to study, and talk to the proper supervisor for this. Okay, so to finish the doctoral school, basically you have to do this in 3 years. Okay, some you can have one or 2 more years to finish your job in special conditions, but basically when you are choosing to get a PhD in architecture, you have to realize that you are getting yourself in a lot of work and trouble. In the first year, you have to attend some general classes, and then in the second and third to prepare your thesis. And the thesis, you have to, let's go to the thesis, the completion of studies. So to get the PhD degree, you have to have the 150 credits from the previous activity and 30 more when you defend your thesis, when you have your public defense of your thesis. And that's a thing you should do in front of a commission of 5, from which one is the president, and there are 2 more professors from our university and 2 guests. All of them have to be have to have a PhD and to be at least associated professor or recognized or a very recognized personality from that particular field. each of these 4 members, so leaving aside the president, have to prepare a report on the thesis, and based on this report and on the public defense, you get or not the PhD degree. And if you allow me, at the end I put this slide to invite you to participate. It doesn't have anything to do with the PhD school, to participate to the European architectural medals, best diploma projects, competition for students, started by our universities, by our university, together with the Architect Council of Europe and the European Associations for Architectural Education. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Then we have the opening of a possible clarifying questions. Is there anybody? Yeah. Then
I'm waiting.
Yeah. Then you are free to go and to take part in the discussion.
Yes.
Not to go, but to. I will only need this one to be. How do I get back? This is what we were going through right now. I think we could have some general discussion if there are some comments, general comments on what we've just been through here. And then afterwards, I will give you a very personal introduction to the themes of the discussion we have had on the position paper, just to open up and invite you into this discussion, not to say anything about how and what we should be discussing, but to how we could discuss it. So as long as we have not prepared anything specifically on the previous discussion, this will be an invitation and an indication of where this discussion could go. But first, I would like to ask if there is any comments, general comments on what we have been going through right now. Yes, then we have Adalberto.
Thank you. Sorry, it's I don't know if it's the right moment to start posing certain questions, or if it could be better after another presentation of what will be, for example, in Ljubljana in October. I mean, starting from this discussion that we had today. And I'm sorry, but I'm not, I don't know exact. Sorry?
Yeah, thank you. We would like to hear from you.
Yeah, okay. You are right. Sorry. So I don't know if it's the right moment to pose certain questions. Okay. Starting from today, because for me this is the first or the second maybe time that I'm coming here in the research, just trying to understand what's coming on, what's coming on. But this thing I don't understand exactly, which is the task of analyze, or anyway knowing what's happening in the single places, in the single school, just speaking mainly about the organization. We have to understand if this is one of the problem that we have to face. Now, I imagine that this is part of a general mapping, isn't it? It is, okay. So it's a mapping that, I'm sorry if I ask you these things, but I really don't know at the moment. If something that comes out from a questionnaire or something like this, or this questionnaire, yes. But the fact is that speaking about the questionnaire and understanding, listening to the 7-8 presentation that we had today, in my opinion, it could be interesting to have maybe a broader vision of what's happened, or what's happening, or what's happened in the school. Starting from, just starting from my experience in my PhD board. Because it's difficult to understand now the organization without, for example, having contents or results. Because I don't know which is the beginning of this experience, but anyway, here we could say that this started from the Bologna process, which says that there is a European, the name is European Higher Education Area. This is something that it's common for all of us. It's something that depends from this agreement that have been signed in Bologna and so on. So there is an area, a common area. And after quite 20 years from that moment, 99, so 18, what is it? There are no, in architecture, I don't know in the other disciplines, but we don't know exactly what's happening, what happened and what's happening. When I say what happened, does it mean that medium also understanding the relations and the intervention, it's something that started about in that period. We, for example, in Polytechnic Milan, we started in 2000, immediately after. And so we had a certain story about the fact that we had people that finished a lot of them and so on. So, and then we had the organization, which is the organization that Spartaco told, and Milano maybe has something different, Sassari another, Rome another one, but closer. They are quite just very, very similar, obviously. But it's something Italian, so every country has its own. And we are here not just, in my opinion, to try to harmonize, as they say, no? No, that's not the problem. It's the contrary in a certain way, just to understanding and mapping which are the situations. So, but for this point of view, it could be interesting understanding what happened, what's happening, relating to the organization and the contents. Because it's otherwise difficult to understand if one organization is a good organization or not after 15 years. Otherwise, I have to understand what's happened, which are the results. Where students, degree, a person that had the PhD person, what happened then? Which is the relationship with, for example, well, okay, with school we know. Few of them in Italy, but mainly are part of the schools because there are problems from this point of view. But, for example, the relationship with the profession, because in this, from this point of view, there should be relationships with the profession. So it should be also something related to. And so this is another important thing because, for example, speaking from the architecture side, the relation with the profession is important, and the possible relationship from the PhD people and in relation with the activity and the job, it's something that it's interesting. So this is what, it's in a certain way the fact. It's interesting to understand the relationship between, in my opinion, between this fact. Otherwise, we can put all our box or shit over there, and it's not something which is coming out. So this is also a question in a certain way. Thank you, Gunnar.
Thank you. Then I will try to answer some of it. It's very good how we have looked upon it within the Research Academy. Then I have two people who want to talk. This is a mapping, trying to both respect the diversity and to be able to discuss the diversity, especially also to find the common ground where we are all facing the same problems, but with very different approaches. So it's not quite harmonizing, but it's trying to create not the orchestra rehearsing on their own, each and every one, but to make us play together like a symphony orchestra. And then we can play very many ways, but we play together. This is what we was trying to do in some ways. And so this was trying to start a discussion, hear what is being discussed in each school, and then try to make a questionnaire based on the things we need to find. So we have made a questionnaire, and then we will make a further mapping, and then this also we want to translate into a position paper that tries to make us act in a strategic and way to achieve common goals. And one, of course, will be the relationship to the practice. So I think most of these issues that I heard you say, it was a bit too much to answer in a quick way now, but I think these are the things that we will be continuing to discuss in the Research Academy. We try to make an open discussion on this. And then I had two people who want to talk. Sally?
Hello. I suppose there's two things I was wanting, two comments I was wanting to make. And one is a slight crossover from the Education Academy. It just strikes me that in the third cycle education, that there is much more significant difference between what each of the degree models offers, not just on a national basis, which you might find within the first and second cycle, but between institutions. Institutions have very, very different rules and different structures. So that is much more different than the first and second cycle. And I think that in itself is a very interesting thing to consider. And the second thing is that there clearly is not one good model. There's lots of good models. But what's interesting is what is to map what those models deliver, both in terms of the research and new knowledge that's produced, the type of researcher or practitioner that's produced, etc. And that too is much more diverse than what happens in the first and second cycle. So there's a huge amount to be learnt here, whether we already have PhD programs, which many of us do, or whether we're considering new programs or where our programs might move to. And I think that the mapping of that also has to somehow illustrate, capture what that kind of trajectory or journey or experience is for the student in the process, as well as the institution in delivering the education.
Thank you. We are losing a bit of time here now, so I will try just to sum up something before you can have that one for the moment. Not to be able to talk, but still. I think we have moved this from the meetings of the Research Academy into this forum. And what happened was, for me, I was astounded that these presentations were much more homogeneous than we had in the Research Academy meetings. And that, I think, comes from the fact that they're the people who are wondering where they are standing, are coming, and want to discuss because they might be out on some limb. But here it's much more people who are within the tradition of their own universities, within the so it's closer to a traditional approach we see here than what we saw in the meetings of the Research Academy, somewhat. So when we say we had this experience of great diversity, it was not necessarily present here. And the other thing is, we did not dig deep enough because we did not have the time that we had in these meetings, because we were collected for 2 days or more 2 days. So something happens when you have better time than we have now. So I'm sorry to say it was not necessarily instrumental in showing what we have learned before. We have two people. We're losing time, and yeah, quickly. And you
very quickly, I would make a general comment about this first short overview that we have seen, just to open our mind. First, if a research academy is a sort of boundary in which we can work on, PhD is one of the tasks, but probably we should add some further space devoted to research within an academy, because we know that PhD is one step. Secondly, I've seen from this first presentation that there is a tendency of a very short gap between the master diploma and the opportunity to enter to the PhD study. I mean, we are observing, not just in Italy, that there is a trend in which graduates, master graduates, become early PhD students. This is not exactly what happened, for instance, 20 years ago. So this is a point that we should discuss.
Thank you.
Hello. I just wanted to mention, going in that line, that I think it's more than the PhD. We now have in my university, UIC Barcelona, we have an Erasmus Mundus Master. We're 4 European universities, and we wanted to go to an EJD, a European Joint Doctorate. I thought this was a great platform to see what kind of research we're all doing, because these consortiums, there's a lot of money funded by the European Commission. They're now called international training networks. I know it's very competitive, but I think if we have this network where we're seeing basically what research we're doing, which are very linked to our PhD studies, at least in our university, the research lines are guided towards what the PhD students are doing. It would be a really interesting map to see, because these consortiums are difficult to construct, but I think that that's where the future of this network of research should go to. So I just wanted to ask if anybody has an EJD going, because we are trying to propose that in our consortium, and to see how it's going. And this could be a really interesting map to see who's working on similar topics to go to joint European doctorates. Thanks.
Despite us having losing time, I'm very happy I had you two speak. So thank you very much. I will like to, because we have had a discussion, because it's not documented well, because if we could restart it, I would take my own personal viewpoints on this to you, because we would like to invite you into the discussion of the Research Academy on these topics of how we create a position paper or strategy based on what we are seeing right now. And the position paper, and this I will write, these are notes you cannot really understand. These are very personal notes, so please think. But it has to be, we do now have a research charter. You do not really need to discuss what architectural research is. This is not really the problem. The problem is, what are the position of this research? How do we deal with institutional, financial, and other framing networks, framing situations that push us away from what, maybe pressures away from what we need to do, or maybe into what we need to do. So we need to discuss the pressures on us to be able to do what we should be doing. So we need to take up the issues, the problem, and the tasks of how to deal with how we create the best possible architectural research. And I agree, research is much more than the PhD program, but it's a starting point. It's one picture. It's one picture of the position, but it does not cover the whole field. Then, what does research in schools mean? And this is where we overlap with the Education Academy, because we need to know what research-based education is. And it's not bringing in the latest results of research into the education. It's not like you have the newest book if you are at the university. It's not at all that. This is what you do on the lower level education. Before you enter university, what happens in the university? And the real meaning of research-based education is that you get the view of the researchers, how they look upon the world before they have found the answers. And that is a much more cultured, diversified, chaotic picture of the field, because you are looking for patterns and you are not telling about the patterns you have found. And what you do at the university level when you have research-based education is inviting the students into this discussion. This is the true meaning of the term research-based education, and it's usually lost to a lot of people after it was created by Humboldt many 100 years ago. But you have to know what that is, and to invite the students into the discussion and to think that the students also have valuable contributions to this discussion is what research-based education is. So it's not about the results from education going into the education. And what types, I'm just making statements. This can all be discussed and should be discussed, but I'm making statements. The other is, what kind of education research do we need at the schools? One is, what do the education need us to research? What kind of research covers and livens the field, vitalizes the fields that need to be vitalized for the students to go into the discussion? This is not necessarily technological research. It might be research into culture. It might be ethical research. It might be aesthetical research. All these kind of research is needed to give a good education. And we need to map what kind of research do we need. There are also three other kinds we need at the university. It's research that get the advantage from being in an educational situation, that can get their value from being there. It's also research that gets the value from being in an independent institution that can be critical, search for the truth without any other framework than that there are an academic institution with the freedom to do research. This is also necessary for us to do, but it is not our primary aim. Its primary aim is to make research to support and to open up the education. The fourth one, is research that brings us into contact with other fields of researchers. It might be to get funding, it might be to go into the community and all these other places, but it's to get outside the academic circle as a whole. So we need also not to close in on the academic circle, but to go outside into some fields. And you might get money there, but it's not to get the money. So to get people push us to get money, mostly for this reason, but it should not be to get funding for what we are doing. We should do it because it helps us do what we should do. Lisa. So we have the problem that our field, our study, is not recognized in a lot of circumstances. And not in all journals it's recognized, it's not recognized in all universities. The field of architecture has a way of reasoning that does not follow how you should make logical steps. It might be much more like an essay, that it's a fluctuating field that you try to find the idea that evaporates each time you try to pin it down, but you know how to go and look for it. This kind of very ephemeral kinds of reasonings are part of architectural reasoning and need to be recognized as such. So we have a lot of, and we have also yesterday the truth saying of the Japanese beauty, the moment of insight. The moment of insight is a very important part of architectural knowledge. If you don't know how you go to and achieve these moments of insights, you are not really being able to familiarize you with the field of architecture and the field of architectural knowledge, because it's manifested in these moments, not only in reason and in numbers and in rational explanations. So we need to get all these ways of understanding and articulating knowledge into the understanding of how we should promote architectural research. We need to go into advocacy. Where should we push to get recognition for what we want to do? Where should we get the money? How should we make strategies to making possibility, opening up the possibility of getting influence in these areas, arenas where the programs are made? You might go in the side door, but you have to go in to be able to be there and then define it. You cannot wait for somebody to do it. So advocacy is also making strategies for, and then it's a very finger-knotted word there, but establishing communities is a part, sorry, it was late night. how to establish communities. It's a very important thing to discuss and to know what a community is, how a community works, how it's different from a project. Projects are very well-defined, close things, but to create the communities of research and of practice is a very important thing that we should be looking at and discuss how to create. And then is emerging issues can be anything, but it's also what is happening outside in the practice today. What is happening in the field of architecture outside the school? What is emerging in the society that we need to address? All these things also has to go into a discussion on policy. So these are things that we did discuss when we were in Prague, that we need to start discussing again, and we need to make a very good, what do you call it, write down what we think, and we need to do it in a shared way so that we don't lose it again, and then you are all invited into this discussion. We really hope that you would like to be part of such a discussion. So this is an invitation. That is all. Yeah, somebody is allowed to say something more here.
Thanks very much for that eloquent explanation. I would just like to, it's two rhetorical questions. The first one is, we're talking about something that's happening within higher education establishments. The Bologna Agreement was mentioned. How many people here know what the baseline for the constitution of European universities is? Is it to help students develop critical thinking? Is it to help students develop creative thinking? In fact, it's both. Every single university in Europe, let me not be bigger than, I happen to know Europe, but I think others are very similar, has a baseline, has set a baseline a long time ago. Prague in Europe was the first one. And that is helping students to develop critical and creative thinking. So, what's the consequence then for the education program that goes around from primary education to secondary education to tertiary education, which includes higher? And that's the only other point I want to make. What's the position of a PhD in that structure? It is, in fact, again, I go back to the constitution of universities, the teaching requirement. The PhD is to help the students develop through the different BA, MA, MSc, PhD, to become an expert, a professional in whatever the program is that has been agreed. It doesn't mean that if you're doing an architecture PhD, you become an expert architect. You take a point, and I think that's the big issue for the next stage of this excellent development, to really become clear of what the framework is within which we work. And I'm afraid I'm a violinist, so I look at architecture and everything else in my life through head, heart, and hand. I don't separate them, because if I do, as a violinist, nobody would want to listen to me. So I think it's the framework, and I strongly support what you're doing. Thank you.
And it was an excellent finishing off. I was glad not having to do that, so thank you very much. Then I think we need to have something to run down and get some coffee, and we'll be back again to hear all this dissemination of results of what has happened before. Thank you very much.